I hope the heavens don't open on us. It was looking a lot gloomier earlier when we headed out, so I'm confident that hopefully we will be able to survive the drive rain-free. I would hate to have to do the big TV show that we are doing tomorrow for Big Cat Week with wet, soggy boots. So let's hope we stay dry for that reason. I'm still continuing just to scour the earth for some of the smaller critters. There's so many interesting little things that are so easily overlooked, and to be honest, a lot of the time we are looking for the big cats and big animals like elephants, the exciting stuff, which means we tend to kind of overlook the smaller things. Scarlett, you would like to know what is the most exciting situation that's ever happened with me on foot, and probably the most... Was it elephant? Was it leopard? Was it lion? There's so many different kind of little stories that I could tell that all kind of vary in the way they've unfolded. But the closest I've ever come to having to shoot an animal was with an elephant bull. He came incredibly close to us, and he was probably from me to you away. So as he would fling out his trunk towards me, it would come probably about a meter away from my head. Thankfully, he kept stopping at that distance, but what was so scary about this situation is that he pinned us down against just a big tree, a big ebony tree, for about half an hour before we could radio a vehicle to come in and chase him off the scene. So that was probably the most life-threatening scenario I'd been in. 4 days prior to him pinning us against that tree, he had actually attacked somebody. He had got a hold of a human and tried to trample him. Thankfully the person survived. He fell into kind of a rocky outcrop with almost a natural kind of cavity, and his whole body could fit into that hole, and when the elephant was trying to stand on him and crush him, it couldn't get at him because he was in this small little crack in the rocks. So that was my probably most scary, but there have been lots of other scary moments with lions charging. I remember once tracking a leopard. We knew she had cubs at the time, but the tracks we were following were just of her, not of her 3-month-old cubs walking alongside her. So we figured, well, let's follow these tracks and hopefully it'll take us to a kill. We were moving through a thick area along the Sand River, which is in the Sabi Sands, just a bit further south of us here. A lot of thick riparian vegetation, and we were moving through. It was first light, the sun was rising, and the tracks were heading towards the sun, which is really not the ideal situation, because when you're walking into the sun, you can't really see too well. But I noticed a small kind of flicker in a bush, and I stopped, lifted up my binoculars, and as I looked and focused my binoculars and saw a tiny little cub peering at me, that's when she came charging out of the bushes. And leopards are incredibly quick animals, as a lot of you know. It was just a flash of gold and black rosettes all around me, and she literally came all the way around myself and my tracker. We were both standing right next to one another, and I was almost kind of prodding her away with the rifle. It all happened so quickly, it was such a blur, but that also got my heart racing. What was her name? She was a big female leopard. It slips my mind. But she was a very big female leopard that I was lucky enough to spend time with in the beginning of my career. Back in 2008 I started guiding here in the Sabi Sands, a bit further south of where we are now, in a beautiful area along the Sand River. So yes, a number of exciting moments do happen out here, but considering how much time we spend on foot, it actually doesn't happen very often that we get into dangerous situations. Hello Trista, you would like to know how confident are we feeling about finding some big cats for tomorrow's TV show. Well, we've got not only Herbie and Rexon, who you guys know are permanent trackers on site. We've employed another 2 trackers who have come in to help, and they've been doing an incredibly good job over the last week or so, finding us a lot of animals. So I'm confident that we are going to have some cats in the bag. Obviously we've got the Mara crew as well, and it's quite easy to find the big cats in the Mara. So we've got 3 vehicles out there. So between them, the 2 vehicles out here, plus Steph and myself on bushwalk, I'm confident that we are going to get lucky. The trick comes in, Krista, is that finding the big cats is often not the be-all and end-all. It's what those cats are actually doing once you've found them that can become the next kind of piece of the puzzle, because if all of us had cats that were fast asleep, it wouldn't make for the most exciting TV show. Yet it is a reality, and it has happened in the past that we find the cheetah, we find the lion, we find the leopard, but they're just snoozing for the whole TV show. So let's hope that not only do we find the big cats, but we find the big cats on the move.
Alright, so the gremlins have now decided to hit my comm system a little bit. It's going to be a little bit tricky for me just coming around the corner, but our signal should still say fine. So you can stick with me, no problem, and we'll chat away. I'm still kind of looking for Hasana, but I haven't really picked up any tracks. So what I'm going to try and do, because it looks like the cloud cover has lifted rather than coming down, which is good, I'm going to head back to where Tingana is, and I'm going to see if our gremlins will just leave us alone and we can get a visual on him, because I know everybody would like a nice update with him and his injury. But again, when I saw him this morning, he hasn't moved too far, but he's not unhealthy. I think he just needs some rest and some time, and he'll sort himself out nicely. He is a nice big male. For those of you who may not have watched before, Tingana, we're not quite sure exactly when Tingana was born. So he's about 10 or 12 years old, and he is one of our dominant males in the area. But most leopards, by the time you reach sort of 12 years old, you're really starting to push up into old age. I know leopards that have lived in the wild to be about 18, but that's an exception rather than the rule. And so he's getting a lot of pressure. He's getting a lot of pressure from Hasana, who's going to be 2 years old in February. And Mvula is also about 10 or 12 years old. He's also kicking around still, so there's that pressure. Quarantine is pressuring him. I would assume that Tamba would start pressuring him as well, depending on where Tamba's going to go, although in the sort of 2 months that I've been here, I haven't seen Tamba at all, so I have a feeling that Tamba's moving maybe more south, but that's just a guess from the little bits of information that I've had. So it'll be interesting for him. I was talking with Tristan and Viam earlier, and apparently they saw yesterday he's got a couple of marks in that paw, so it looks possibly like maybe he was in a bit of a fight. And it happens, especially, I mean, remember, cats eat meat, and so they've got a lot of bacteria in their mouths, so when and in their claws as well. And so when they're fighting and they're using claws and teeth, and if they bite or scratch, it's going to get a little bit of infection. But again, the hardy animals, and usually he's still in good condition, so usually they pull off fine. So I'm not too worried about it. But again, we'll just keep an eye on it and see how it goes. Sorry, Curse, can you just try that one more time for me? That haven't been seen before? You know, that's a super good question. So some of the times we talk about population numbers of the large cats that are left on the continent in sub-Saharan Africa on the show. So for instance, there's about 20,000 wild lions left. There's about 7,000 wild cheetahs left. With something like leopard, we don't have any numbers for the whole population, sub-Saharan Africa and the whole continent, because they're so elusive. So for your question about how many unseen leopards might be in the area, I couldn't actually give you an accurate answer. I would guess if we're seeing sort of, let's say for now, 10 individuals on and off within our area, that there might be 2 or 3 other individuals that we don't see as often or know about that might be skirting. But also because leopards are quite territorial, and they have set territories that are somewhat movable, we can guesstimate more often than not that there'll probably be less leopards that we don't see and more leopards that we do. But that's also just for our area, because in our area we have populations of leopards that have been so used to humans for so long that they see us as part of the natural environment and just carry on life and without feeling the need to hide all the time. Whereas leopards that have not had that same exposure, their natural instinct is to hide away as much as possible. Not necessarily because they're fearful of us, but that's just their nature to be more elusive. And also with a lot of the leopards that we do see often who are used to us, they have days, just like the lions do, they have days where if they don't want to be seen, we're not going to find them. It does happen. It's a very good question and a very good thought. I used to do some leopard research many years ago, and the woman that I was working under had been working with leopards for about 15 years, and she was amazing. And the area that she was working in, the populations had been hunted quite a bit, so they actually had a full-on fear of humans. So part of what she was doing was trying to relax the populations, but a lot of how she was working is she was working closely with trackers, because each individual leopard has an individual track, and when you get trackers that really know them, they can tell you whose track that is, not just from the territory they're in, but the actual individual. And then doing ID kits, obviously, with the marker lines. I don't know if there's any viewers out there who have any little gifts they want to put up with the whisker lines, for any of our new viewers that might not know what I'm talking about there. And then you can sometimes do a more invasive way of doing research, where you dart them and you put a GPS collar on them, and then it sends data in, so you only have to deal with them sort of once, or twice rather, once to put the collar on and once to take it off, and then the information comes from the GPS down onto a computer system. There's also a way to do with the collar with a telemetry system. It's like this little antenna, and it has beeps, and you can follow them that way. Just depends on what type of research you're doing and how invasive or non-invasive you want to be. So that can sometimes help in a small area to know the numbers of leopards you might not be seeing. But in general, it's a hard one. It's a very difficult one. Even with the cheetah numbers, I've worked on properties where the cheetahs are very used to humans, and I've worked on properties where the cheetahs don't want to be seen at all, so that can also be quite difficult. It's good questions. You guys are having the best questions. Well, you always have good questions, but today you're having some really, really great questions with lots of good commentary and stories. Teak, you're curious to know what happened with our injured wild dog. Teak, the ecologists and the management of Sabi Sands decided to do what they normally do with populations that are settled. So even though the wild dog is an endangered species continent-wide, our populations here are in this area are quite settled. So we do what's called in situ management, which is hands-off management in cases and scenarios where injuries are naturally induced. So that injury on that wild dog had to do most likely with being attacked by a lion. It's not a human-caused injury, so it was left alone to let nature take its course. And unfortunately, yesterday when Senzo and I went to go check on it, the wild dog had passed away. It does happen. It is unfortunate. It is sad, but it is part of nature, and that just happened to be the outcome for that scenario. We did if you watched the show from yesterday afternoon, we did a small little segment on it, and you can have a look there. All right, so Scott is still on walkabout, so let's head on over to him and see what he wants to show us.
Well, nothing to show you right now, but we are on one of the roads. Now, it's always a bit of a toss-up when being on bushwalk, whether to stay on the roads or follow the game trails through the bush. And the benefits of being on the roads is that is where the clearest messages of the bush telegraph are left for us. It's far easier to see tracks on the road because the sand is often finely churned up from vehicles, especially after it's rained. If we look here, the sand is very hard, so even though, now I push my fingers down very hard, you can see a few prints, but if I do the same thing here, it becomes a lot easier to see a track where the vehicles have actually been driving. So the vehicles driving after the rain kind of churns up what is ordinarily a hardened layer of earth on top and makes it a bit easier to see tracks. We're not too far from Tundi, a female leopard's den site, and we just kind of working in this area. Hopefully we'll find some tracks of her, or maybe hear some alarm calls, and they'll be able to lead us to her position if she is not at the den. Now, it's exciting prospects. The den site is going to be open as of tomorrow, so hopefully tomorrow morning a lot of you guys will see Tundi's little cub for the first time. We think there's only one. We're not 100% sure. Tristan's only been in there once just to establish that it was in fact a den site. So very, very exciting prospects, and let's hope that Tundi gets lucky and manages to raise it to adulthood. Sadly, the odds are stacked against her. A lot of the times leopardess will lose their cubs, either to hyena, other male leopards, possibly lion. They are very, very vulnerable when they are small. Okay. Krista, you'd like to know if there's any chance of seeing any other cats out here, like caracal and serval? Yes, there certainly is a chance, but it's about this big. In all my time in the Sabi Sands, I've never seen a caracal, yet they do occur here. Serval, you've got probably a slightly better chance than caracal, but again, they're not highly numerous in this part of South Africa, and they typically tend to be a bit more nocturnal and quite secretive. They're not also as habituated as the other big cats like lion, leopard, and cheetah, so even if we were to drive past one, there's a strong chance it's going to hide from us. Not to say we're not going to get lucky, but your chances are better up in the Masai Mara. Certainly with serval, we've had a lot of great sightings up there with them. They're quite easy to find, and also a lot of them are quite relaxed. So the serval are good up there. I think Jamie or somebody did see a caracal up there, but there haven't been too many caracal sightings. I'm excited for us to get into other areas of the world where there's other big cats. Oh, interesting. Apparently Taylor saw a caracal on Cheetah Plains once. So there has been one seen here, which is in the Sabi Sands, not too far from here. So there's a small chance that, you know, another one could be spotted at some point in time, but it's few and far between. Like I was saying, there's so many other big cats, jaguars, tigers, being my two other favorites that I would love to see. I've never seen neither jaguars nor tigers in the wild, so that's something that I'm really hoping we will be able to do with you guys following alongside for the ride. So got to keep telling your friends about Safari Live. The more people that join on our vehicles and our walks, the more places we can take you to. So phone a friend, tell them about Safari Live, and then it will increase our chances of going and showing you jaguars, tigers, and who knows what else, polar bears. It's never ending where we can go and take you guys on safari. Good. So that's your homework. Please phone a friend, tell them about the big TV show tomorrow, tell them that it would be unwise not to watch it, cancel their plans, whatever they had in store, and hopefully that way we will be able to take you to more places. Very good. We're going to send you across to Noelle. I'm not too sure what she's up to. Why don't you go find out?
Oh, Scott, you make me laugh so hard. Photo friend. Yeah, so Scott's basically saying the more of you that know about us and the more following we get, the following for Safari Live over the years has grown exponentially, and you guys are all wonderful, we love you, is that means that we get to possibly go to more locations. So on Scott's wish list apparently it's jaguars, which would be down in the Pantanal, I would assume, in Brazil. Polar bears, I don't know where we would see polar bears, maybe Svalbard if we went up there, or maybe Churchill in Canada. There's a couple spots to go and see them, and that would be super interesting. If I had a wish list for our next destination, I would say South Luangwa National Park in Zambia, because it is just other than here in the Lowveld, it is my favorite place in the whole world. Yeah, that would be super interesting. What'd you say, Sense? Oh, what are we going to see there? I'll tell you now, not just Sense. I believe the question was, have there been any introduced alien species like the rabbits in Australia and the cane toads into this area? So we have some vegetation that's been accidentally introduced. Red Mexican zinnias, which I haven't seen yet this season, and coquibos, which I actually haven't seen yet this season as well, and things like blue gums or eucalyptus. Well, most of them have been taken out, but those would have been introduced. As a sort of animal species, there hasn't been anything large here in this area like a rabbit or a toad, but we do get, I think Steph told me the other day it was a single-banded snail. It's this type of snail that comes in on potted plants by accident. So the potted plants come in from overseas, and then sometimes you'll find people will buy them and then bring them to either their houses in the area, or maybe they come into a lodge and then those snails will come, and that's quite detrimental. But in general, this whole area that we're traversing has been a wilderness area for hundreds of years. So there's not a lot of reintroduced. Now there's been relocations / reintroduction of species that had been decimated out of this area due to human causes that were brought back in because they're not supposed to be naturally occurring here. There's some cases like that. But no, nothing. We've been very fortunate. Nothing like what happened in Australia with the rabbits and the cane toads. Super interesting question. Thank you. So it's interesting about that. I once had a guest that told me that we in South Africa were not doing a good as job as we should be doing with the poaching, and we should bring all of our rhinos to Australia, and they can be in Australia. And I found it a very interesting thought. I got where he was going with it. Basically, he's saying our government's there is a little bit more stable. We've got different environmental and conservation laws, so this would help with protection. That's basically where he was going with it. But now when you take a flagship species, and a large flagship species, a herbivore species like a rhino, and you bring it to a completely different continent where it didn't even exist. So white rhinos have existed on this continent for 50 million years. Okay. Now Australia broke away from Africa 180 million years ago, so we're talking big differences. So they would never have occurred on Australia. They did occur, sorry about that, there's a little bump there. They do occur obviously in Asian countries, a little bit different, but they do occur there. So when you move such a large animal, the implications not only for the area that you're removing them from, but also the area you're moving them to, for me in particular, far outweighs the good thought behind something like that. It's really important to keep wildlife where wildlife should be and make sure that they have spaces, because they were evolved to be in those areas to fit specific niches. And it's not just them, it's all the insects that's around them, it's the plant species they eat, it's the way the dung fertilizes the soil and the plant species. And yeah, there's huge ripple effects and knock-on effects and repercussions for something like that, as you would know with something like the cane toads and the rabbits that happen in Australia. As an interesting thought. Okay, I'm sorry, my gremlins are still poking around inside my ear. I'm really sorry about that, but I do think that something has happened with Scott, something good, and we are going to go to him. So let's head on over to Scott quickly.
Yes, we do have something good going on here. We've just seen a white-faced whistling duck fly out of this mass of green bushes, and I'm actually not entirely sure where they nest. So I just want to make sure that we don't actually have a white-faced whistling duck nest over here. Doesn't look like it, and if any of you would be so kind as to do a bit of research into where they actually nest, it would be wonderful. They're such cool little birds. This is why they have their name, the whistling duck. That's what their call sounds like. Oh, I thought I saw some little frogs jumping about here as I came in. I want to see if I can't flush one from its hiding place. Come out, wherever you are. Not too sure what kind of a frog it was. There's one or two of them tiny little things that hopped out of here. Oh, here we go. They're tiny. On the side, Dave, if you go on that, it's just sitting on the... Oh, there we go. Have you got it? Let me try chase it back towards you. Any good?
Oh, we got a quick one.
It's a tiny little frog. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. It's just next to that little blade of grass directly under my finger. It's very well camouflaged.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. It's absolutely... Oh, there it goes. It's tiny. It's the size of my fingernail. What are you? It actually looks like a toad. No, this is definitely a baby toad. It must have just metamorphosized into full toad mode as opposed to being a tadpole mode. Awesome. I'm not too sure exactly what toad this is. I can tell by its build that it is very toad-like, I'm guessing. If there's any frog experts watching, or toad experts, you're welcome to correct me. But it's absolutely tiny. If I put my finger next to it, you'll get an idea. It's as big as my fingernail. Cute! Tiny little critter. Now, thanks very much to Kirsty, who's already done some homework for me, and she has said that white-faced whistling ducks will nest in areas just like this, in kind of reed beds on the edge of water sources. So we were unlucky now, but maybe next time we come back here we will find a little duck's nest. Very good, very good. It's a very peaceful evening. The wind seems to have died down a bit. The rain has stayed at bay, thankfully, and hopefully it will continue to be this way. I love this stage of the evening. As darkness begins to set in, it becomes very exciting being out on foot. It's also been quite nice just taking it slow, enjoying the smaller things, not on the trail of anything big and strong. And I'm told a lot of you were impressed by that little toad's cuteness, which I'm very happy to hear. Like I said, there's so many interesting little things happening out here that are quite easy to overlook. Hello Tesla, just 7 years old. You'd like to know how many kinds of frogs live in South Africa, and I'm not sure exactly, but there will be many different types of frogs and toads that live here. I'm guessing well over 100, but I'm not too sure on the exact numbers. I can see some tracks in the mud here, most of which have already kind of dried up. Some big elephant prints you can see over here, the big round ones. Oh, here's a water scorpion. Cool. Come check this out. Oh, that's a bit squidgy. I'm going to need a little stick. It's just in this little puddle over here. They're bizarre little insects. It's actually not a scorpion. Just called a water scorpion because it looks like one. Let me try and get it out for you guys. Come on. There it goes. Look at that. What a strange little creature. Very scorpion-like, but certainly not a scorpion. It's an insect. It's got only 6 legs, not 8. So it's not an arachnid. And I'm loving all these little things that we're bumping into, all these little treasures, hidden treasures that we would never be able to see from a vehicle. Cool. Not too sure what they actually feed on and what they do exactly, so I've got some homework to do when I get home this evening, learn a little bit more about them. Another frog. This is a frog, it's not a toad. Okay. Have you got it there, Dave? I think it's going to stay put for a while. This looks like kind of a grass frog, I'm guessing. It's got a very sharp nose, very different to the bulbous head of that toad we saw earlier. Also doing a great job hopping about, springing itself from spot to spot. And it's so easier for us to forget how ridiculous some of these little creatures are. I mean, imagine if we could jump like 20 meters from a standstill. Because that's the equivalent of what this little thing's doing because of its tiny size. Let's see if we can get it to hop one more time for you. We might have to do a little slow motion on this if we do get it to bounce or hop. Oh, there's another one that just came shooting out the... Oh! Let's see if we can get it jumping towards you. This was a knobthorn tree. It's going to pop out now. Doink! It almost jumped into the camera lens there. And off it goes. A good display of how agile and how powerful those hind legs of those little frogs are, sending it rocketing out of harm's way. Good. Good. Oh, got a thorn I need to take out here. We can show you guys this experiment. It's a knob thorn that got me in the back of the leg here. I'm going to use my trusty Leatherman to get it out. Not that I need to. Kind of over dramatizing the scene here a bit. Oh, it was hardly anything. Shame. Tiny little thorn. Sorry to take you away from your thorn friends. Okay, very good. Enough of my antics and over to Noel.
Enough of your ticks, Scott. Scott, we love your ticks. Alright, so before we get to Tingana, I was not far from where Tristan had Tundi with a leopard kill this morning. So I just want to have a look around. Sorry for the back of my head. I'm just trying to see if I can see anything. Now, there's the kill. I don't see a leopard. Let me just pull forward a wee bit. Can you see it there, Sons? So she's cached it under a tree just here. And this is also the area where Scott saw that unidentified male. So this has definitely been eaten on, but I'm not seeing any sign of leopards. I have a feeling before Tristan had to get towed away, he was talking about Tawny's tracks going east, so she's probably gone back to her den to feed her little one, well, nurse her little one. Now, everyone, don't forget, it is a big cat week on Nat Geo Wild, and tomorrow morning for us, but it's actually this evening for you guys, yes, if I'm doing my time changes correctly, 10 o'clock Eastern on the 14th, which is today, you all will be able to watch a very special Safari live on Nat Geo Wild in the States. So that's 10 o'clock Eastern time. So I hope everyone tunes in. And as Scott was saying before, tell all your friends. We will be out and about for 2 hours. So from 10 to 12 in the PM. And then for us, it's tomorrow morning. But for you all, as I was just saying now, it is this evening. So I'm not seeing any activity around here. I have a feeling that little male, if he is here, is probably hiding. And Tawny will probably only return to this maybe later this evening or possibly tomorrow morning. So you're going to definitely have to tune in to the show on Nat Geo Wild to see what happens with that. It's super, super, super exciting. All right. So let's definitely go to Tingana then, because I don't think that he's moved very far. I am just looking sort of under bushes and checking inside of trees around me. Ginger, I think your question was, are Tingana and Mvula the dominant males in this area? And that would be, for the most part, correct, yes. Tingana more than Mvula. Mvula's been pushed out of a lot of his area, but so is Tingana. Quarantine sort of edging in, and Hassana is being cheeky. Hassana hasn't taken over territory yet, but he is being cheeky. So yeah, I think that's a fair assumption to say, Ginger, for sure. Mvula and Tingana. But also the two of them traverse areas that we don't traverse, but for us here where we physically are, that is a very fair statement indeed. Okay, sorry again, I'm not looking directly at you. I just don't want to hurt Wendy. Wendy and I have come to a very good understanding, and I'm trying very hard to not injure her, like I did the other day with the crazy wild dog chase. Oh, that would be something that would be fun to pop out tomorrow morning / this evening for you all in the northern hemisphere. The wild dogs, haven't seen them in a while. They went over to Torchwood, which is on our east, and I haven't seen them since then. And Senzo and I had so much fun with them for those several sightings that we had. It was just absolutely fantastic, and you all know that wild dogs are my favorite predator. Now, the only predator that I haven't been able to show you here, just me. I know Tristan's showed you before, and I'm pretty sure Scotty D you might have, but we'll have to ask him when we go back to him. So I haven't been able to show you a cheetah here. They keep coming in from the Kruger boundary, but they're not making it as far west as we are. So I'm holding, crossing fingers and holding thumbs that they pop up soon. Scarlett, you're curious to know if I think a kangaroo would survive in South Africa, Scarlett, that's a really interesting question. I actually don't know that much about kangaroos. Now, kangaroos is something that I would love to see in the wild. I've had many guests from Australia, and I've had guests say, you know, we've got kangaroos in our backyard, and for me, I'm like, oh my goodness, a kangaroo. I would love to see one, and I haven't made it to Australia or New Zealand yet. That's both on my list. So I think that a kangaroo would do okay, but remember that Australia doesn't have large predators like we have here in Africa, so I don't know how long it would survive. I think it would find things to eat here, but I think there'd be a lot of things that would eat it. And then also, think about it this way: if you spend all of your life in one place and then you go to some place completely different, so if I were to spend my whole life in South Africa, say, in one spot, and then, you know, go to India for the first time, the water is different, the food is different, all the macroorganisms that go into your gut will be different, everything will be different around, so your body's going to react differently. It's the same for the wildlife. So if your body is accustomed to certain organisms that help it to function, and then you displace it somewhere else, there could be a consequence that you never know. So I think in general it might be okay, regardless of the predators, unless they get preyed upon, but I don't know how well it would do with the type of vegetation we have here, because it's a bit different. Alright, now let's ask Scott if he has any cheetah stories about the Djuma Sabi Sands area, and we're going to head back to him and see what his answer is.
I didn't quite catch that question, but I'll get to it as soon as I know what it is. It's something to do with cheetah. What I can tell you is that there's not many of them in the Sabi Sands, and in all my time here I have seen very, very few cheetah and spent very little time with them, sadly. Having said that, though, it's a good example of how, when planning a safari, and if any of you are ever planning a safari, it's very important to do research into kind of what likely animals you will see in any given place. There's certain areas of South Africa, not just in the Masai Mara, where you get good cheetah viewings. There's some wonderful places in a province called KwaZulu-Natal, which is my home province, where you get great cheetah viewing. But here in the Sabi Sands, it's more leopard and lion, and I think our number one cat that we pride ourselves on in this area, or at least the reserve prides itself on, is the leopard. These are not bran muffins. It would be nice if they were. I'm feeling a bit peckish. They're quite nice and big, but in terms of elephant poop, they are small. And I would hazard a guess that this was a 3 or 4 year old elephant that deposited these little bran muffins here. You can also see it urinated. There's a very big patch of urine, and this is fresh. The fact that no dung beetles have come onto the scene to start helping themselves to all this dung, which they'll roll up into a ball and lay their eggs in, because they haven't come onto the scene yet, gives us a good indication that this is very fresh. And as you can see, we're moving through a fairly thick area. There is a small riverbed that we're working our way up, and we need to be cautious, always taking the wind into account. It's not really in our favor because we are walking that way and the wind is blowing that way, but it's unavoidable to always have the wind in your favor, and as long as you're aware that there's a strong chance that whatever is ahead of you is going to smell you before you actually see it, means you're kind of ready for what may happen thereafter. So now that we've got into some softer sand, we'll be able to tell which way the elephants were moving. And interestingly, I'm fairly certain they've come down this pathway and moved in the direction of the dung. So they've already moved through this area. If we look at this one track over here, it's a youngster, possibly the same individual that made the poop. There's a small little depression. So it would have put its heel down over here and then flicked up that little bit of sand where you can see that depression there. So that gives us the indication that they were moving down this pathway in the opposite direction to us, so we must have just narrowly missed them. Having said that, it doesn't mean that there's not another herd of elephants up ahead, or who knows, maybe a buffalo, even though there's not many around. I don't think I've actually seen one buffalo since I've been here. which is a small miracle, but I guess the drought did take its toll on them. And it's not to say that there's no more buffalo in the Greater Kruger National Park. We are part of a massive, massive ecosystem here, roughly 300 kilometers long by about 50 kilometers wide. And there are other areas that were obviously not as affected by the drought and more suitable to the buffalo that they all moved into, or those that didn't die. And slowly the buffalo are coming back into this area, but I've only seen their tracks. I have yet to see one, which is very interesting. There's actually a spot up ahead where I'm guessing the same herd of elephants whose tracks we've just looked at now were sleeping up ahead of us. There's a beautiful tambuti thicket type of tree, and they have for many, many years. Even in my past time here, they've often liked to camp out under these tambuti trees. Hello, Kaylin, you mentioned that you would never want to see a buffalo on foot, and yes, especially if they startle you and you don't know they're there. Even a big buffalo bull in thick vegetation can come out of nowhere, and it's probably also the last animal that I would want to come across. Having said that, the breeding herds of buffalo, the large herds, they actually can be quite good fun to approach on foot. They're more inquisitive, they don't feel too threatened because they've got safety in numbers, and you can have some good fun approaching them on foot. They often just come looking up at you with their heads held high, looking down their noses at you, not squinting like I'm doing now. I'm just doing that to hopefully make some of you laugh, but they look down their nostrils, holding their heads up high to work out what you are. Alright, well, Noelle didn't have any luck at Tundi's kill, but hopefully she's going to have a little bit of more luck in the area where Tingana was last left this morning. She's approaching that area, so go and jump on and see if you guys don't get lucky.
Thanks, Scott. I also hope we get more luck with Tingana. We're not far from where we saw him this morning and where we tried to be this afternoon, but hold thumbs. Gremlins, go away. The rain is coming in. It changes everything a little bit different. I can see it coming. It's surrounding us. Rain, you need to hold off for 35 more minutes, and also not tomorrow morning, please, and then you can rain any other time you want. So we're gonna head to him, and hopefully he hasn't moved. I don't think he will have moved far, but hopefully he hasn't moved, and we'll take a gander. This morning was really interesting because he was just sitting there and there's elephants all around. It was very cool. Trista, you're curious to know if which leopard we would step in to help to preserve the species. Am I repeating that correctly, Kirst? Okay, so Trista, it's really important to understand that when you step in to preserve a species, it means that there's only a handful left, so say 10 in number or 15 in number. And there's way more leopards than that across the continent of Africa, and then there's other species of leopard that are doing okay. There's some that aren't. So when we think as humans about preserving a species, we have to be very careful, because most of the time when humans interfere, it doesn't turn out well. So when a leopard like Tingana has an injury, it's the same sort of thing as a wild dog, sort of hands off and let him sort himself out. If it is very, very, very stressful for a wild animal to be handled by humans. So let's say we bring the vet in for Tingana, he gets darted. He doesn't go to sleep. That serum that he's given just immobilizes him. His eyes have to be covered. We have to make sure that his mouth is open so he can breathe. He still understands everything that's going around with him. So now that's happened. Now you're a leopard where your hearing, your sense of smell are extremely acute, and you now have all these people working around you. It's extremely stressful for them. There's also scenarios where humans have stepped in for, say, a rhino or an elephant or a leopard like this, and the animal has died. So we have to be very careful to not play creator. if that makes sense. So for Tingana, with this paw, we're not going to step in with this. Now, I know that there are some other scenarios that have happened and have been gone a little bit differently, and there's been some other choices that have happened. When the ecologists and the management make these choices, they have years and years and years of schooling behind them, as well as a full comprehension of the entire scenario. And one of the doing, which is a very important thing for all of us to remember, myself included, is to take the emotion out of everything. Because when you put the emotion in, sorry guys, I'm just trying to think of the best way to get in here. When you put the emotion in, you're not going to make the best decision for the animal. You're going to make the best decision for you, and that just, for us, it's not always. It needs to be more about the wild animal than anything else. So that was a very straightforward answer for your question. That was a stick up my side of my car there. So I'm very sorry if it sounded a little bit brusque, but it is just very, especially after the wild dog thing we were dealing with, it's really important to remember that manhandling wildlife, even if we think we're saving them, is 99% of the time not the best scenario to do. Oh, that's fantastic. Pihan, you're saying it's a bit like an alien abduction. Pihan, I think that is possibly the best way that you can put it, it's like an alien abduction. Sorry guys, you are going to have to stare at the back of my head because I keep running myself through bushes here. So just give me 2 shakes of a lamb's tail as I meander through this to get us through. And then bless you, Senzo, at the back with your sneezing. Bless you again. Senzo, did I drive over something that you're allergic to? Maybe. Maybe, he says. Okay, so where I saw Tingana this morning was sort of straight in front of us that way, and then where he is now is in the same direction but just a little bit closer. And he's doing what leopards do best, which is to find a little space and camouflage himself and rest. Sorry everybody. So it's interesting, it's not incredibly thick through here, but there's a lot of fallen over dead trees and stumps that I'm meandering through and trying not to get stunk into the sump or the side of the car. I think, Curse, that's a good idea. I think while I am just meandering through this minefield that is this area here, let's go over to Scott quickly, and then I will hopefully find Tingana for you, and then we'll come back.
It's beginning to drizzle, ever so slightly. We're not too far from camp, thankfully, but we are under a beautiful big ebony tree, which will provide us with a little bit of shelter for now. It's a very fine mist, and I love this spot. I've come for 1 or 2 picnics here in the past. Very beautiful spot, and in and along this riverbed called the Mulwati, we've had countless leopard sightings, even as we were walking up along it now. Herbie, the expert tracker who I'm teamed up with, was pointing out a number of trees where he's found certain leopards with their kills. No luck today, but we're not finished traversing it. We've got a little bit further to move up along it, and hopefully we'll bump into a leopard along the way. I'm hoping Noelle gets lucky. I'm told she's doing some bushwhacking, trying to find you old Tingana. I'd really love to know what happened to him and what caused that injury to his paw. Was it trying to take down a big prey item like a kudu or an Inyala bull? Was he fighting with another leopard? Impossible to be certain. I'm told Vehement Tristan did get a few kind of views of some puncture marks and bite marks, but they're not very clearly evident, and you'd think that if he was in a fight with another male leopard, he'd have a few scratches on his nose and, you know, a few more telltale signs of a cat fight. So I'm wondering if he didn't actually try and take down some big kind of member of prey. I have seen big male leopards like Tingana take down fully grown male kudu, which is a serious undertaking. for an animal the size of a leopard. Who knows, but hopefully he'll recover. Sharon, you're concerned that Tingana might be sick, and he could be, but I mean, it's clearly kind of like a bone injury, you would think, or a dislocation or a sprain. He's hardly putting any pressure on that front left leg, so that would indicate to me that it's not sickness. If he all of a sudden became thin and was walking okay on all four legs but just losing condition, then sure, I think sickness would be likely. But I'm guessing it's just an injury. He is also an old leopard. He's not a spring chicken. He's certainly racked up some mileage over his 10 or 11 years. I think he's 10 or 11 years old. So certainly not a youngster. And I guess it's not uncommon for animals to injure themselves and then recover. It's fascinating how resilient wild animals can be, and there have been a number of ridiculous stories of animals like hyena surviving with only 2 legs after the back 2 legs have been chewed off in a fight. Sadly, the wild dog that we lost a few days ago wasn't so fortunate, but it is Mother Nature's way of making sure that only the strongest and fittest survive, and that we must never take for granted and never think otherwise of, because it's important that our wild animals are kept strong and fit and healthy, and the only way to do that is by making sure that only the best individuals make it through. Those that don't provide good meals to others and just make their genetic pool that much stronger. What's the wind doing? Not a whole bunch at the moment. Kind of gently wafting around. Hello Bobby, you'd like to know if the cats get distemper, and I'm told that they actually can indeed, but I haven't personally seen any individuals with it, but I'm told that it is a possibility. I don't think that is the case for Tingana, and thankfully in this reserve, even though there are risks of any disease like distemper, it's a very well managed reserve, and because there's a lot of people traversing it, we tend to kind of know what's going on and can take care of situations like that before they get out of control, whereas you get other wilderness areas that are far more vast and not as well patrolled, and therefore animals in those areas, if any diseases or sicknesses do get in there, obviously it's more difficult for any of the professionals to know about it because it's not as well traversed as the Sabi sands. I think it's fair to say that this is probably one of the most traversed areas of the Greater Kruger National Park in terms of the amount of tourists that come through here, in terms of the amount of guides driving around every day, in terms of the amount of road networks there are. You get some areas of the Kruger National Park where there's many miles with just no roads and no access for humans to go in, although there are some incredible walking trails that you can do through the Kruger National Park that typically take you through these areas with absolutely no roads. Something that I would love to do in the future, go and explore some relatively unexplored parts of the Kruger National Park. You okay, Dave? Dave nearly got caught in a buffalo thorn there. He does have a long antenna pole sticking up behind him, which can cause a little bit of trouble from time to time, either for the cameraman getting caught up in overhanging bushes, or we can actually try and simulate it. If we were to bend down and start talking about something and Dave was to continue bending down, if he bends down enough, dunk, the antenna will hit me on the head. So that does happen from time to time, and hasn't actually happened to me. Dave's been a very good antenna driver. He's got his license, and thankfully haven't been walloped by him, and it's just a matter of time that we do get ourselves into some exciting situations where these things are unavoidable. Here's some little bits of mud that an elephant would have left here after a mud wallow. He would have come and scraped his way, and look at how high the mud goes, all the way up there, and I'm 6 foot, so that's maybe 7-8 foot up. and a good idea of how big these elephants actually are. Very good. Noelle is still on the search for Tingana. Hopefully she's getting closer. Why don't you go and have a look?
Okay, where Senzo has pointed his camera is where Tingana was. And I was sitting here with Senz and we're just listening, and all of a sudden, up ahead, we can hear Tingana. So he's moved, so obviously he can move even with his injury, and he was doing his No, it's a horrible leopard impression, please excuse me. So we're gonna reverse out of our little area. I don't think he's far. I think he's maybe 100 to 200 meters just in front of us this way. So you can stick with me. I'll try not to lose Senzo off the back or hurt Wendy or myself in the process in this thick little bushes. It's a tricky little spot that we found ourselves in, but of course, Tingana being a leopard, that's what leopards do best, is find tricky little spots and fit themselves inside. This is our 100-point turn for the day. Sorry, wisteria. Okay. Ooh, let's go. So, because he has a injured paw, he's what we would call a sticky niao. A niao is a foot in Shangaan, and that's what we call an animal that sort of hops along, so we can also call him hop along. So he's not going to be moving too quickly. There's also the possibility that he's resting again, although usually with leopards, when they make that call, they are moving. Lions will make their audio territory calls that lying down or moving, or in any sort of scenario that they feel like, because they're a lion and that's what they do. But leopards tend to be a little bit more practical about the situation. So I heard the sound from in here. So I think while I'm driving and looking for him and also trying not to get over the stumps, I think why don't you all look with me? You've got about the same eye line that I have, and we'll see if you all manage to spot him before Senzo and I do. Although I have to say, Senzo's eyesight is pretty spectacular, I'm not gonna lie. Now, the other thing that I think is he's where we showed you before is inside a drainage line. I think he's most likely moving inside of that drainage line. So the other thing that I need to try and do, that is a very thorny bush. The other thing I need to try and do is try and see if there's a way for us to get inside of this drainage line. It's a very tricky drainage line to get into. Very steep banks, sharp banks. Ooh, Scott's getting rained on at the moment. I can see the rain, and we've got a little bit of drizzle, but we haven't been hit quite yet, but we have our hat on. Scott's out on his own 2 feet on bushwalk, so it's a little bit trickier for him. All right, I think, hold on one sec, I just want to listen. Remember, the birds will tell us where leopards are a lot of the time. And the alarm call for them. But around here, he should be somewhere right in here. Now, he could be just down below. Let's just check. Check here at the front of the car. So if you all were physically with me in the car, like your physical bodies were here, this would be the exact same thing that we would be doing. So whether you're with me on camera or with me on the car like Senzo, this is how you search for a leopard, and this is what you do. And we use all of our eyes and all of our ears. And I'm hoping he calls again. It'll make it easier. Trista, I have not lost a cameraman off the back, although the other day I was very close to losing Senzo. We were rushing to try and get to some wild dogs, and I hit a bump very hard. And Senzo's whole jacket went over his face, and he flew up off the seat a little bit. I'm sheepishly looking at him in the back. He wasn't impressed. But no, I've never lost a tracker off the front of the car. I've never lost a guest, and I've never lost a cameraman. And I hope that it doesn't start today ever. I think he's here. I don't think he's too far from where we are right now. So that sound that we heard, I really just want him to make it again. Because I don't have any physical tracks, and because obviously we can't see him or else we'd show him to you, I need that audio to help pinpoint. So you can track via foot, or you can track via sound, or if it's something like an elephant or a rhino or a buffalo that's rolled in the mud, sometimes you can track them by the mud trail that they leave. Got lots of francolins crying. But because this rain's coming and the bird life in general is quieted down a little bit, come on, Tingana. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if he's lying sort of right here and staring at us. Can we hear any of these bird calls in the background? A little bit. There's woodland kingfisher calling. There was the francolins calling. There's some scrub robins calling. Here's our francolin. Now we just need Tingana. Come on, Tingana. At least give us a leopard sound. Everyone's waiting. Scrub robins are very active. Now the other thing, so let's say we heard a senso. Let's say I was with guests and I had my tracker and everything. Something we might do would be to get off at this point and sort of walk. But for me right now, one, I've got you guys with me here, and then two, because Tingana has an injury, I don't want to pressure him too much. Just like you might be the most pleasant person every day, but if you have a bad migraine or you've injured yourself in some way, you're going to become a not as pleasant person. And so you don't want to push the boundaries too much with him. And then also, if he does decide to come into a place where we can see him, fantastic. If he's decided to go into a place where we can't see him, he's sort of made that choice, and we also just have to respect that. Now, I think, because he hasn't called again, there's also the possibility that maybe I just misheard a little bit. Let's just try a little bit farther down, and we'll see what happens. Alright, well, I'm busy meandering around here. Let's go back to Scott and see what he's up to on his own 2 feet. Maybe he's found us some more track to look at, or maybe animal.
Hello everyone. We haven't found any tracks just yet. We've just been clearing up the rain cover that was actually over the camera, and happy that we got it off just in time. Well done to Noel for finding Tingana. We're getting closer to camp now. Quick, Link, we need to send you across to Noel.
Alright, just as we start going away, and just as we tell you we're going to go to Scott while we're busy looking, lo and behold, who comes into view? Mr. Tingana. Now we're just trying to position to be able to show you with the camera. Well done. So Sen's, after we got off with you guys, Sen stood up in the back while I was driving along, and he managed to get this view, which is exactly what we wanted. So he was maybe 100 yards from where we were. And he's pretty much in the open. It's just a little bit harder for us. Senzo, you must just let me know. Maybe I must just do this. I think that might be our best bet for now, so that everyone can at least get a view of him. He's just in front here. Yay! Hello, Tingana. Look, he's even looking at us to say hello. Oh, fantastic. All right. So he is... Oh, there's the yawn. He's the last-minute leopard indeed. Ladybird, you read my mind just as I was saying, listen. Very cool. Did everyone hear that? All right, now remember earlier I was saying the leopards usually do that when they're moving, and Tingana had moved. I think maybe with his injured paw that he's still trying to do as much territory marking audio and with urine as possible without moving as much either. He doesn't want to give up the ghost at all with this, which is a good plan, I think. And Ladybird, yeah, you read my mind just as I was saying he's our last-minute leopard today. Your comment came through, and it was the same thing. Well done. Great minds think alike. So he yawned a bit. He did his audio territorial marking. The Franklins are going completely nuts next to me, and I'm hoping what he'll do is get up and start moving a little bit, because we can see him very nicely with the camera, which is fantastic, but there's a couple of spots that's a little bit farther down that makes it a little bit easier to see. But also, that being said, if he doesn't feel like moving, the old man also needs a bit of a rest. Sorry, Tingana, I just had to shift my foot there. So one of the reasons why he's probably moving a bit more now than he was this morning is it's getting cooler, getting towards night, and we were talking earlier about all the other males that like to come sort of infringe upon his territory. He needs to at least attempt to keep some of his territory during the next few days while he's recuperating. There we go. So you can see his little hop along. He can put a bit on there. It's much better than it was this morning. Which means that it's loosened up in this cooler weather. I believe everyone's saying, yay, Tingana. I'm agreeing. Yeah, so this morning he's doing much better than he was doing this morning when I was watching him. This morning he didn't want to put any weight on it, and now he's putting some weight. That's good. It's getting better. I think it's basically what's happening. I think it's just the fact that it's so swollen and it's not... Listen. This is fantastic. I think he hears another leopard, to be honest with you. And I think he's hearing... Obviously his hearing's much better than mine. There he goes. Let's see if we can keep pace with him. Sorry, everybody, as I meander up the back here. Sorry for any branches, Senzo. Frank, you're curious to know if maybe he's got a thorn in his foot. Frank, it's possible. When I saw it earlier today, it looked like a sprained foot to me, but Tristan and VM spent some really good time with him yesterday, and they were saying they saw 2 little puncture marks in there, so we think he was in a fight with another leopard and that his paw was bit. That's what we think, because there's also apparently some scratches on his side. And it would make sense. There's enough other leopards in the area. There he is. He's scent marking with his urine. You can just see his bum end. It's very difficult. I'm going to try and... Sorry guys, he's being a typical leopard and going into a very difficult spot, so I am going to try my best. Alright, while I try and get you another view of this beautiful Tingana, let's go back to Scott and see what he's up to.
Yes, we are steadily approaching camp, looking forward to a cold beverage of sorts, and happy that Noel did manage to find Tingana for you guys. Let's hope that paw of hers recovers sooner rather than later. I think it's going to remain a mystery to us exactly what happened. I also suggested maybe it was just a thorn in his foot initially, but I've been told that's definitely not the case. Ginger, you'd like to know how many miles we've walked today. We've taken it very easy today. We haven't moved far at all. I'd say maybe 2 miles. Yeah, I'd say 2 miles. But on average, we would walk around 6 to 7 miles on our average walk. Obviously, each one is different. Sometimes you hear alarm calls or on the trail of something and you hoof it, you cover huge distance. Other days, you don't need to cover as much ground. One afternoon, we spent the whole afternoon with some elephant bulls just in and around this very area. So it really does depend, but it's certainly been wonderful spending time out on foot, stretching the legs after being bundled in a vehicle in the Mara for the last 4 months. Scarlett, you'd like to know how heavy is the bush back backpack that David is carrying, and it's quite light at the moment. It's been modified like everything here at Safari Live. It's permanently a work in progress, trying to make things better and more efficient. I actually used to be on camera for some of the bushwalks back in the day when Steph was leading. I would be on camera, and back then it was about, I think, 7 kgs or 8 kgs, whereas now it's only about 2 or 3, I think. So only about 6 pounds. It's very light. It's basically just a metal frame with the essentials bolted onto it. Before we had a big plank of wood, much heavier, less efficient batteries that we had to lug around and change off and halfway through the walk. But right now it's really not too much of a burden for the cameraman, thankfully. Definitely more than nothing. What gets in the way more than anything is the long antenna. Once we can get rid of that, then it'll be far easier for us to sneak around undetected on the bushwalks. Often we have to kind of plan our route when approaching elephants through areas where there's no low overhanging branches, which often provide us with the best cover. So it does make things a little bit tricky for us. Certainly not as tricky as taking regular guests on a walk, though, I'll tell you that much. Just having Herbie and Dave to worry about if something did go wrong is a lot less stressful than having 3 or 4 guests. Ordinarily you would have 4 guests per rifle. If you took any more than 4 guests on a walk, you should in theory take a second backup rifle so that you can herd them more effectively when things get out of control, which they do from time to time. But we've got quite a slick operation in terms of sneaking about undetected. Very good. We are going to continue moseying on back towards camp. We might get a few views of the resident herd of wildebeest and their youngsters before we get there, so that would be nice. For you, back to Tingana.
Here he is. I'm always still so impressed with this zoom that we have on our camera, because where he's sitting from here is not easy to see with your own 2 eyes, but when you get the camera in there, it's absolutely fantastic. So he's hobbled along down to this little spot, and he's just listening and looking around and keeping an eye out, smelling the wind a little bit every now and then. Bobby, what an interesting question. You're curious to know, will Tingana run away from a fight now because he's got this injury? I actually think, Bobby, because he can't move very quickly, I don't think he'd run away. I think he's going to stand his ground more. Remember, he's still a very large leopard. He's probably about 80, 85 kilograms, if not a little bit more. So that would be about 200 pounds, roughly, just a little bit under. So his best chance is to sort of cover his parts that are easier to get into, so his backside, and then use his teeth and his front claws. And the adrenaline will rush through enough that if you were to start fighting at close quarters, he would still use his injured foot. But something else that he would do is, if another leopard started coming up, he's going to use his voice before he uses his fist. So when we were all kids, we were all taught to use our words, not our hands. So he's going to use his words first, and only then, if he gets any further approach, will he start using his claws and things like that, and his teeth. So he'll spit, he'll snarl, he'll grunt, he'll hiss, and he'll try and sound big and also not show his weakness to his opponent. Eagle, that's an interesting question. You're wondering, what would lions do if they heard Tingana sighing? So if the lions are extremely close, they might get interested if they can hear and smell him. But if they're farther away, they'll still hear it and they'll perk their ears up, but they're not going to go rushing after it. I've seen lions rush after leopards that they've physically seen, as opposed to leopards that they've heard, unless that leopard has made a kill of some sort and then they've rushed into the area. So where Tingana is going to meander, from what I can see now, oh no, you had to be that guy, and he went up the other bank. Tingana, we only have a couple minutes left. Do you really have to be like that? Oh guys, I'm so sorry. I'm not gonna be able to get where he went to. I'm very sorry about that. It is a very tricky little spot here. All right, thank you very much for the drive. It was filled with lots of wonderful little moments as usual. And don't forget, 14th of December, which is today, on 10 o'clock Eastern Time, on Nat Geo Wild, we're having our special Safari Live show. So please tune in. We can't wait. For us, it's tomorrow morning. For you, it's tonight. So it's going to be absolutely amazing and hopefully action-packed and big cat-packed. It is Big Cat Week on Nat Geo Wild, which is why we're getting our special show aired then, and it's going to be, I can't wait. I'm so excited. It's my first TV show with Safari Live, and everyone else that's going to be with me tomorrow, they've done other TV shows before, and they're just as excited as I am. So thank you very much for a wonderful afternoon drive. We will see you in a little while.